Right. Yeah. So if you look at financing, if you look at investment field, right,
Mm-hmm.
um, we see that only 1.8% of investments in Europe go to women-only led teams.
Yeah.
20% goes to mixed founding teams. And you can do the math here, but the rest goes to male-only
Uh,
teams, right?
yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's a sort of 80-20
yeah,
rule.
exactly. And inclusive financing is about, for me, I mean, there's lots of different definitions, I'm sure. But if
Mm.
you ask me, it's about getting beyond these biases and then leveling the playing field in finance on all level. And of course, that means both for men and women, but also for people from different ethnical backgrounds or other marginalized groups, basically.
Yeah.
So very shortly, that's how I would look at inclusive financing.
Welcome to Women Disrupting Tech. My name is Dirk-Jan Upkes, and on this podcast I give the women who work in tech the platform they need to inspire and empower each other. Join me on a journey into the world of entrepreneurship, funding, biases and role models to discover the strategies for success in the tech industry. In other words, how women can disrupt tech. Are you ready to listen? Hey, welcome back to Women Disrupting Tech. Thank you for listening to episode 51. So, how do you balance feminine and masculine values in a tech startup ecosystem that is dominated by men? And if you manage to balance those feminine and masculine values, how does that help to create a more inclusive funding system for tech startups? To answer these questions, I reached out to Alice Pavin. Alice describes herself as a passionate generalist. She is a program and investment manager at WorldStartup, where she leads the Women in Ventures initiative. Together with other experienced team members, she is on a mission to create a more inclusive and regenerative economy. In this episode of Women Disrupting Tech, we'll dive into the world of inclusive investing. We'll discover what an inclusive funding system looks like, how you can be a change maker in a post-growth world, and we'll learn how to balance feminine and masculine values in the tech startup ecosystem. Plus, Alice will give some practical tips on how entrepreneurs, male and female, can improve their resilience, balance, and well being. When you're ready to listen and learn how to balance feminine and masculine values in business and investment, please welcome to Women Disrupting Tech, Alice Pavin. So, welcome, Alice. Good to have you on Women Disrupting Tech. The question I always ask at the start is how you got into your current job and or current position, and start wherever you want.
Oh, thank you so much, Dirk. I'm super excited to be here. And yeah, how I got here. I lived in the Netherlands about a year now. I'm originally
Mm-hmm.
come from Sweden. And how I
Mm-hmm.
got into my current job is actually a little bit of a story. I was in the Netherlands for a holiday. It was summer, it was sunny. It was also Pride Festival, and it was just a great time, as you can
Mm-hmm.
imagine. And at the time, I lived in London for 5 years, working in the startup landscape there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was maybe just the right time, let's say, to be swept away at a holiday after these 5 years. I think I was ready for something new. So while I was here, I started applying for a few jobs in the startup field. Um, one thing kind of led to another. So during my holiday, I got some interviews here, met the teams, some organizations, and also got two offers actually. But at the time, then I felt like maybe it's reasonable to spend a bit more time on actually finding something that really is aligned with what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I also, noticed that I was not really finding the kind of impact element of the companies where I was, receiving the offers from being strong
Yeah.
enough. So my interest actually in this kind of environmental, social, and also especially well-being started very early for me, around when I was 15. And that's also why I got into the startup field in the first place. So I took a bit more time to look around in the Netherlands and eventually found a company I really resonated with. And this is then WorldStartup, where I work now. And I've been working for a bit more than a year. And yeah, I worked there as the investment and program manager, and been really enjoying it. Yeah, so the rest is history.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why you're here as well. So
Exactly.
today we're going to talk about feminine and masculine values in business. We're going to talk about inclusive financing, about women in ventures.
Mm,
But the discussion, I think, starts with a post-growth world,
mm,
and maybe good to if you explain to the audience what that looks like.
right. Yeah. Well, one thing is clear about that. It does
Mm-hmm.
not look like the world we currently have.
Uh
That's
huh.
that's one thing. We're
Yeah.
obsessed with growth, right? So you see that both in business, but you also see that in our personal lives. So if
Mm-hmm.
we talk about business first, especially in focus on the startup and investment world where I'm active, um, there's well, actually, when I enter the space of impact entrepreneurships, my view of what it contains actually is very different from what I believe it is now. Right.
Oh, how is it different?
Well, so I simply thought of impact as tackling one of the SDGs. So,
Mm-hmm.
like for example, let's say you are tackling responsible consumption and production. That's SDG
Yeah.
12. So you
Mm-hmm.
could be building a business that uses innovative technology to make an edible wrapping to
Yeah.
replace plastic wrapping around food products, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here the idea and the solution is sustainable, is impactful. But what we're not then seeing is the business, how the business operated, the business model itself, the mindset that they're using. So you can
Mm-hmm.
take like funding as an example,
Mm-hmm.
where the current model of our time, which usually is referred to as the Silicon Valley model, is that startup seeks capital injections for investors,
Yeah.
which puts them in this kind of revenue losing position right away. And then they
Yeah.
define success in form of venture capital exits, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you see here a focus on rapid expansion right away, and usually on the expense of the quality of the business, and usually also then the treatment of employees, customers, ecosystem, society, and planet at large, basically. So it's all
Mm-hmm.
about growth, or at
Yeah.
least it's primarily about growth, right?
Yeah. Yeah. They see growth as a solution to the problem.
Right, right. So this is the current model. But then the
Yeah.
idea with the post growth model is a model of doing business where growth is not everything.
Mm-hmm.
Where kind of flat growth curves isn't a thing that people are afraid of, is naturally a bad thing. And where the
Mm-hmm.
need for investors for quick scaling, for exits, are
Mm-hmm.
not the preferred way,
Yeah.
right? So more specifically, you would start small, you would focus on growth, on organic growth.
Yeah.
You would adapt the idea that bigger is not always better.
Yeah.
And then you would work to maintain that kind of ownership of your own business, and don't extract that financial value from the business to investors. So it's basically about shifting that mindset of what success is in business, and then reimagining a new normal for doing business. That's post growth as we see it.
Okay. So, do I understand correctly that this also requires us as a society to start thinking differently about how we manage ourselves? Because, as I said, growth sort of still is considered the solution to everything.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And I think, today we're facing a polycrisis. And the
Mm-hmm.
solution to such a crisis is not a simple one. It's tackling it from a holistic perspective. And of
Yeah.
course, policies and legislations, etc., plays a huge and very important role. But so does the culture or the mindset in the individual. So you're
Mm-hmm.
very right about that. And I think if we're talking in terms of more on an individual level, things that I've been um, thinking about myself is taking a moment to consider how it affects me, this growth mindset.
Yeah.
We live in a world with this kind of constant productivity, efficiency, growth
Mm-hmm.
has
Yeah.
become almost a disease, let's say. So we see
Yeah.
the stress, anxiety, burnout, etc. So it's also about, asking yourself if you recognize yourself in that constant doing, if
Mm-hmm.
you can be okay with not seeking that constant growth in your personal life and
Mm-hmm.
appreciate what you have. Not always making it about the end goal, the result, but also about the journey and the process, right? Because at least from my own perspective, that's what makes life enjoyable, right? It's actually the process, not necessarily the result.
Yeah, true. As long as you're on your way, but then still sort of the process, at least in my mind, usually ends in some sort of growth. And in my case, that's mostly personal growth because I think I'm growing as a person, and I'm of course getting older, but getting more experienced.
Yeah.
But that makes in those terms, it generates growth.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily like this podcast is not paid or anything, so financially it doesn't lead to growth, but
but it leads to another kind of growth, right? You're providing that positive growth, let's say, to the listeners and to yourself and to the ecosystem that you're trying to change. And I think it's indeed good to clarify that growth is not bad, but we need the right kind of growth, and it should not be the primarily focus where everything else is taking the hit from it,
Oh yeah, okay. No, that I understand and I actually agree with.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if we're talking about feminine and masculine values in business, is post growth, is that more of a feminine value type of thing, or also a male masculine?
Right. Yeah. So it's about a balance of the two. It's not about more feminine or more masculine. It's about refinding that natural balance between the two sides that is required for a post-growth world. And maybe I can actually clarify a bit what I mean with feminine and masculine values.
Please do.
And also here want to highlight that it's not connected to your sex, being a man or woman, or however you define yourself. And it's not connected to gender as a social construct either. So as individuals, we both have feminine and masculine values, all of us, right?
Yeah.
But okay, let's take a step back and just actually look at what they are. And this is also part of the Women in Ventures initiative that I'm running, where we host workshops on these topics. And what we usually start with the workshop is actually asking the audience, what are feminine values for them, for example. And, as a listener, they can even, you could pause your audio now if you want to have a think about it before. But the kind of categories here, the research that I've been basing it on is from a Harvard Business Review. They interviewed 32,000 participants where they asked to then categorize different human values as either feminine, masculine, or neutral. And this is kind of the findings, the conclusions from that study. And we see here that feminine values are values such as intuition, nurturing, collaboration, allowing, vulnerability, amongst many more, of course. And masculine is logic, protecting, competition, directing, assertiveness. So once again, all of us has both sides within them, and all values are important. And that's then coming back to your question, the feminine value is not better, but it's the balance between the masculine and the feminine that is crucial, and that we unfortunately have lost a bit in our society, just because we have created a society where we put a bit more value into the masculine thing.
What I was about to say, because especially the Silicon Valley financing model is pretty masculine.
Exactly.
If you look at it, because it is about competition. It is about beating the competition. It's about growth. Well, maybe not at all cost, but almost at all cost. It's about hustling. It's It and
100%. Exactly.
So that's why I was wondering if this post growth world is it's not necessarily in itself, I think, a feminine value, but it puts the feminine and masculine values more in balance. Is that?
Yeah, exactly right. Because we need doing, we need results, we need action, we need that in order to move forward. But we also need collaboration, we need empathy, interconnectedness, etc. So the kind of idea is that going from this highly competitive mindset that you're mentioning yourself to a collaborative mindset, or using only pure logic to involving empathy, or as we mentioned, focusing on the process, what we want to do here and now, not only the result, we can create that post-growth world, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So it is this kind of cultural shift, mindset shift. That we also need in combination with other solutions as well, of course.
Yeah. So how do you let's say implement this in an investment strategy? Because you're working for WorldStartup and
Yeah.
they're an impact investor.
Yeah, or actually, so WorldStartup, we're not investing ourselves, but we are supporting entrepreneurs with access to capital. So helping them get investor ready, understanding which kind of investor to actually,
Talk to.
talk to, because also a common understanding is that, once again, based on the Silicon Valley model, that you should talk with venture capitals or just angel investors, etc. But sometimes it might be more suitable to do bootstrapping or grants, loans, debt, crowdfunding, etc., to also retain that ownership internally, right, that we were talking about in this post-growth world. So this is what we do. And I think, to answer your question then about how can startups actually apply this, both in the investment field, but also in general.
In their business.
In their business, right? This is what we talk about in the workshop that we're hosting on balancing feminine and masculine values. And we're talking and engaging with the audience and trying to see what they find the solutions to be. And first of all, we see that as a startup, there's actually a very good place to start, thinking about this, because it is more agile than a bigger organization.
Yeah.
You have quite a huge control of forming your culture, which then trickles down, which will then affect, the business over many years and the rest of the ecosystem you're interacting with. But some of the key takeaways we see from the workshop is, first of all, is starting raising awareness about that kind of intrinsic value of the balance between masculine and feminine. Started talking about it. But for that also, that it requires a common language to spark that dialogue, right? Once that dialogue is sparked, actually creating that space for you and your employees, co-workers, and other partners to express the feminine and masculine values in your actions as well, without judgment, and being aware and noticing when this judgment arises, right? And another important thing that comes up a lot is the role of role models, for both men and women to be role models, to kind of show that appreciation of the balance of the values, and doing that on all levels. So I'm not only talking about managers, but throughout the whole organization. So how can you create those role models? How can you be that role model? Maybe you are looking to develop a certain side. Can you find a mentor or someone to look up to that can show you how you can integrate that,
Yeah.
And then also, lastly, kind of ensure that accountability within the company. How can you hold each other accountable to balance them as an individual, but also as a board organization? Because, of course, the natural kind of differences between individuals means that someone are more inclined to be masculine, valued, oriented, and others more feminine. That's fine. But how can you look at that, measure and look at that as an organization? Are we balanced as an organization? And also make that visible in data. And at the end of the day, it is individuals that make up a team, that make up a business. So it is a deeply personal journey as well to look at.
Okay. Let's switch for a minute to that personal journey, because you're a life coach, in addition to your work at WorldStartup. We talked about balance between masculine and feminine values. How does that impact well-being of people, of entrepreneurs and founders? And how do you build in also resilience and balance and well-being?
Yeah, indeed. So as mentioned, yes, indeed, I'm a certified yoga teacher, and from there also been getting in contact with the people I meet and working on these kind of topics as well.
Uh-huh.
And as I mentioned, it is a deeply personal journey, right, as well. And you have to go inwards and check in with yourself. So it
Mm-hmm.
starts always with everything, self-reflection, awareness. So asking yourself, do your feminine values or masculine values take more space, right? Like
Uh-huh.
a common example could be, do you talk more than you listen? Or maybe you have a
Mm-hmm.
problem speaking up and being assertive. So it kind of it creates that awareness of where are you on that spectrum, and
Mm-hmm.
how does that impact your well-being? Where is your genuine? Who are you really?
Yeah.
And then work on understanding the discrepancy here. Let's say I want to develop more my feminine side. Okay, so what is it you need to work on? Maybe you need to work
Mm.
on your emotional intelligence. This is something that's quite commonly in our society, and I can relate to that myself, is how am I feeling in this very moment? It can be really hard to put words on.
Yeah.
So a simple just check-in, how am I really feeling right now on a daily basis, can help you develop that. And maybe also coming back to the more startup business related aspect, because it's on
Mm-hmm.
the topic here. This is also something I've implemented into WorldStartup, the team. So when we
Mm-hmm.
have our Monday meeting, we start with a feeling check-in. So one word, how are you feeling right now?
Yeah.
That allows the team to understand where everyone is at. Maybe someone is feeling overwhelmed and needs some extra support. Maybe someone is very energetic and you can kind of use that to get more energy yourself.
Yeah.
But it's also a way to actually establish these kind of cultural in the team, right? But you can do that on your own personal level as well by checking in with yourself. But it could also be you're not feeling that you're empathic enough to yourself or others. You can practice loving kindness meditation. This can be Googled or reach out to me. You can practice active listening. These different kind of practices you can implement in your own life. And then on the masculine side, it could be about setting more goals and actions.
Mm-hmm.
Practice setting priorities, making plans, taking responsibility for your actions and their outcomes, of course. I've done personal OKRs, and maybe a few people listen to this is familiar with objective key result
Yeah.
that you use in business. But I've done that a few years on a yearly basis, that I set up the goals for the year.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's various
And
ways,
how did that help you? The OKR, personal OKRs?
Yeah, very similar to how it helps a business to get focused. What is it that actually you have to sit down and you have to think about what is it that is most important for me that I want to accomplish in this coming year? What are
Mm-hmm.
my objectives? And then once you have them, you get them as kind of a guiding light, right? A North Star. This is the
Yeah.
3 things that I deem as important for me. How should I hit them? Well, these are the key results I should be working on. And then checking in with them on a monthly basis. Am I actually working towards that? Or maybe redefine them and optimize them. It's
Mm-hmm.
just something that lets you know what to say yes to and what to say no to, which is quite important in today's society because there's so many opportunities and there's so much things coming to us.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of choices to be made.
Yeah.
And if you indeed have some sort of guiding light to help you make those choices, it's definitely worthwhile setting
Yeah.
those.
Right.
I think.
And actually now thinking about it, I haven't thought about that previously, but if I look back at the last few years, what I've been doing, then I both
Mm-hmm.
had goals that are, let's say, a little bit more growth oriented or,
Mm-hmm.
societal success oriented of career or whatever. But I
Mm-hmm.
also had goals in terms of, developing my non-judgment, or becoming better at giving rather than taking, which is,
Mm-hmm.
let's say, actually a little bit more of the feminine side. And this is something that I haven't actually considered before. But the goals, even though goals itself are masculine, you could have that balance of setting up the
Yeah.
goals, but then having that to develop something on the other side of the spectrum, right? So,
Yeah. And in terms of well-being, does that then also, in your case, lead to a better outcome that you're happier,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
feeling
mean,
that, like you're living a better life?
it's hard to it is hard to pinpoint, the shifts of your well-being into a certain thing, that this is what I've done because of that. I feel 20% more happy. It is
Yeah,
hard.
well, the quantification is always an issue, but
Yeah. But no, surely it does. And I think it helped me because, as I mentioned, it started with that space of thinking about self-awareness of what do I want, and then basically just trying to create that life for you that are more aligned with your authentic self and what is important for you and your purpose. And
yeah.
I think whether the tool, let's say, or exercise you're using is OKR or something else, but that actually comes down to looking at these topics and then being aware of them and living accordingly, yes, that aligns you with your purpose and that makes you feel better. As simple as that, for sure.
Great. Let's transition to inclusive financing.
Right.
What is inclusive financing? Okay, can you give us a definition, what it means, also in the context of the more balance between feminine and masculine values?
Right. Yeah. So if you look at financing, if you look at investment field, right, we see that only 1.8% of investments in Europe go to women-only led teams.
Yeah.
20% goes to mixed founding teams. And you can do the math here, but the rest goes to male-only teams, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. It's a sort of 80-20 rule.
yeah, exactly. And inclusive financing is about, for me, I mean, there's lots of different definitions, I'm sure. But if you ask me, it's about getting beyond these biases and then leveling the playing field in finance on all levels. And of course, that means both for men and women, but also for people from different ethnic backgrounds or other marginalized groups, basically.
Yeah.
So very shortly, that's how I would look at inclusive financing.
Okay. And you have an Women in Ventures initiative
Right.
at WorldStartup.
Yeah.
How does this contribute to more inclusive financing? Does it do?
Okay, yeah. So let me explain a bit about World Startup first. I think that would make sense. So
Yeah.
what we do at the company is that we co-create progressive and remarkable experiences to change makers for creating that positive growth. So what does that mean? It means that we work together with others to create the kind of support that allows impact-driven change makers, often entrepreneurs, to grow their impact-driven businesses and create that positive change in the world that we've been discussing, today. So as a startup, you can find heaps of useful support and information on how to fuel your business journey on our platform, where we create lots of different opportunities for them. That platform is called the Changemaker platform.
Okay.
Part of the support we're doing, because of course in this kind of impact-driven entrepreneurship field, as mentioned, financing is a big part, and that kind of inequality in finance. So I, as part of the World Startup, together with our partner, the Angel Initiative, which is a women-only angel syndicate, got together and we decided to create the Women in Ventures Initiative. So this is then an example of the kind of co-creation we're doing with others to support these entrepreneurs. And together, what we do at the Women in Ventures is that we emphasize this need for a value balance approach to business and investment that we've been discussing in this podcast.
Yeah.
But also empowerment of women entrepreneurs and investors. So, in short, two things. So it's sparking that dialogue on feminine and masculine values in the startup ecosystem. So we can rethink our practices and roles. And we currently do that mainly through hosting workshops on the topic. And the second thing is that we improve then access to capital and resources for both women entrepreneurs and investments. And we do that through curated programs, but also importantly through matchmaking events where founders and investors that are women meet each other to, increase the amount of investment going into women-led founding teams, but also for women investors to make more investments.
So actually, you're creating the gateway at both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, that's right.
So you're helping the women with a venture to, basically get acquainted with how financing can work and how to seek financing, and you're also matching them with potential investors
Yeah.
to
And
make sure that they can actually meet the right investors also for them. Because
exactly.
I think that is especially for, but I was wondering, is that different for female founders from male founders? What constitutes the right investor?
I wouldn't say because I don't want to make differences between females are different from men in that sense. It's
Hmm.
more that the industry and the
Hmm.
societal kind of idea around it is that it's biased against when a woman show up. But we're speaking a lot with women entrepreneurs, and they're even telling us that when I step into a room of investors,
Hmm.
I have to take on this mask and act differently, because I know that if I don't act in this masculine way, let's say, that the bias will creep in, and then we won't be able to receive equally as much of investment. So it's not the fact that women and male need different types of investors, but
Hmm.
it's more that we need to change the ballgame and the culture and the mindset around it. And that's why we're tackling both on this kind of cultural shift level and the mindset level with the balancing the values, but then
Hmm.
also more of the practical level of just putting these people in the same room and giving the females the opportunities to talk with investors and receive investment and the support they're needing.
Okay, so is that also how male allies can contribute to more inclusive financing in the startup ecosystem?
Yeah, and I think,
By providing that access
yeah,
and
yeah,
actually giving space.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. But before giving space and providing the access,
Mm.
they need to become aware of it, right? And it's
Yeah.
the same as for women. It's not that kind of male versus women problem. It's
Hmm.
also for men similarly, I think, to go inwards, reflect, become aware of where they are on the spectrum. Notice when they are expressing a certain very masculine value strongly, or judging someone for a
Hmm.
feminine trait. So very, very similar here. It's about giving the language to speak about it, to raise awareness, to be role models themselves. I mean, even we did a workshop at Equals in Amsterdam last week.
Yeah.
And my goal is to get 50-50 in the room to be women/male. It's harder than you
Yeah.
think, because exactly about this, I want everyone to be part of the conversation. It's not a conversation only for women.
Yeah, I was about to say, because that is something that's really strikes me, that this whole bit more, for lack of a better word, softer look at how we interact with each other
Mm-hmm.
is still mostly in the domain of women.
Mm,
There's not so many men uh, talking about it
yeah,
openly. That's one, and there's not so many men actually then in the room
yeah. For sure.
also
And
showing
look,
up.
men need, it doesn't mean that men wants to be assertive and logical and action oriented all the time,
No, no.
and it's also for them to feel that they can showcase all different, colors and shades of themselves as well. So they need to be able to be comforting in that. They need to be able to have role models to look up to and be role models themselves, right? And this is
So
also
is that,
something that's
yeah?
coming up in the workshop when men are talking.
So is it yoga and inward reflection traditionally, at least, have always been things that are acceptable for women to do? But is it also maybe the key to changing, making the change on the male side of the on the masculine side of the spectrum?
Yeah, I mean, there's gender stereotypes
Yeah,
around everything, right?
yeah.
Or
That's
what?
why.
Or what do you?
No, no, no.
Sorry, just
That's exactly where I wanted to go. The gender stereotypes.
exactly.
Yeah. So
Yeah, so it's about challenging these stereotypes from both directions.
yeah.
Both women and male, or whoever it is, whatever stereotype it is, right? To showcase the different versions and being okay with that and not
Mhm.
judging it. And that's
Yeah.
why it's both on a kind of broader societal level, and that did need to be raised, but also on an individual level of self-awareness, indeed.
So I want to move a bit towards the end of our conversation. Um, Thank you so far.
Thank you.
Um, I have an arrangement with Jacqueline van der Ende, one of
Hmm.
my previous guests, to make this podcast obsolete in 10 years.
Yeah.
And obsolete means that, in this case, diversity, equity, and inclusion in tech, it just doesn't need any attention because it's our way of living.
Yeah.
And in the context of this podcast, I would say that feminine and masculine values in business are in balance.
Mm.
What what can I do? What would be your expert advice to achieve this?
Mm. It's not an easy question, right? It's a complex problem. It's not a
Hmm.
simple solution. We already talked quite a lot about balancing the feminine and masculine values and your role as an individual, that you
Hmm.
can, what you can start doing. Um, Maybe a thing which we haven't mentioned,
Hmm.
that repeatedly comes back over and over again in my discussions in the ecosystem, is education. How we're still teaching outdated economic models. We are not incorporating or celebrating diversity.
Hmm.
We're not promoting inclusion principles into
No.
education. We have to change the textbooks. I think this is very much where it starts. It starts very early on when you're younger. And we're not doing that. So in terms of the values we've been speaking about as well, including practical exercises that could allow students to not only practice their analytical thinking, but also their emotional, intuitive, empathic intelligence. I know that's for sure something I have been needing and am working on. So if we want that culture shift within the tech industry and beyond, of course,
Hmm.
it's needed to integrate it into all levels of education. I'm a strong believer in that myself, at least.
Sounds like a great place to wrap.
Yeah.
Alice, thank you very much for this wonderful conversation. Really appreciate it. If people want to learn more about you, about Women in Ventures,
Mm.
World Startup, would you like to send them?
Oh, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Super, super fun. I've really been enjoying it.
Hmm.
Women in Ventures, we have a LinkedIn page called Women in Ventures, easy to
Hmm.
find.
Yeah.
Give that a follow. You will be able to see the work we're doing, and kind of opportunities coming up. In terms of World Startup in general, if you're, a change maker or an entrepreneur yourself, there's lots of opportunities. You could simply just Google the changemakerplatform.com. This is where you find all that kind of resources, support, experiences, content. A lot of this is available for free as well. And yeah, I mean, I'm at LinkedIn under Alice Pavin. I would love to continue these conversations with whoever finding them valuable, and yeah, connect with you all. So women as men. Let me put it like that. But
Okay.
yeah, thank you so much for having me. I've been enjoying it tremendously.
Me too. Thank you very much. And also, listeners, thank you very much for listening. We'll include all the links in the show notes. And with that, I want to, thank you for listening and hope to see you in the next episode. Well, that's a wrap. Thank you for listening to episode 51 of Women Disrupting Tech with Alice Pavin on how to balance masculine and feminine values in business and investment. Alice and I hope that you've enjoyed our conversation as much as we did. If you want to learn more about Alice, about her work at World Startup and Women in Ventures, feel free to connect with her via the links in the show notes. And as usual, you can find the show notes at womendisruptingtech.blog. On that same website, you can also become a member of the Women Disrupting Tech community. As a member, you get exclusive access to Women Disrupting Tech events, and you're the first to learn when new episodes or blogs come online. When you're looking for a role model to inspire your own hero's journey in tech, I invite you to check out one of the other 50 episodes of this podcast on Spotify, Apple, and Goodpods. And if you're a regular listener, can you please give the show a rating or a review? That way, you help other people discover the podcast. If you're a male ally and you want to help Alice and the other 50 women disrupting tech make this podcast obsolete by 2032, there's a simple thing you can do. Please share the podcast with friends, family, and coworkers because this way you give my guests including Alice, the platform they need to make it happen. Finally, if you want to connect with me, you can do that via email, dirkjan@womendisruptingtech.blog, or via LinkedIn. Just look up my name and you'll find me. And with that, I wish you a wonderful day. I hope to see you in the next episode. And in the meantime, keep being awesome.